All right, so we're excited to be here today. Let's go ahead and get into our topics. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about the importance of cover letters, why you should write them, why you need to write them, and how that improves your candidacy for a role. We will go over different cover letter formulas. I do have some samples we'll share in the presentation as well, especially related to remote jobs. And of course, we will talk about things to avoid when you are writing and submitting a cover letter. And as I mentioned earlier, we will round out this time together today with a Q&A from you guys. So why are cover letters necessary and why are they so important? All right, let's be honest, and I'll be honest, writing cover letters is not fun. I've never heard anybody say that I've worked with who's looking for a job and applying to jobs that they like writing cover letters. I'm sure there have been times where you skip the cover letter because it doesn't say that it's required as part of the application. You know, just a word of caution or even a warning, by ignoring the submitting of a cover letter, it really can hurt your job search. It is a competitive market right now. If you've been applying to jobs for a while, you've certainly felt that. And so a cover letter is really a tool and a resource that can really enhance your candidacy for a role. In fact, some companies don't even look at a candidate if they didn't submit a cover letter with their resume. Here are some stats I wanted to share around the importance of including a cover letter or what kind of impact it can have when you are applying to jobs, in case you're still skeptical on why you should really be writing one for each position that you apply for. When we talk to or read what hiring managers think, we have found that 83% of hiring managers say a great cover letter was enough to grant an interview to a candidate with a less than perfect resume. I will tell you from personal experience, when I applied to FlexJobs several years ago, my experience, I had a lot of transferable skills for the initial role that I was interviewing for, but I had never been in that specific role previously. And in the interview process, I found out that my cover letter was what got me the interview. 77% of hiring managers do expect one, even if they are optional. Applications with cover letters carefully tailored to each job description yield over 50% more interviews than job applications that are submitted without one. All right, 50% more interviews. So when a cover letter is required, make sure to answer every single question that is required. For example, they might ask you to write a job title, give a salary range, put the listing number in the first paragraph, or something along those lines. They might ask you to use certain fonts, a specific color. They want to know that you can read directions and follow them. And that might be the simple test to get started with you as a candidate for the role. If you don't follow the instructions that are laid out, you'll likely be passed over. Bottom line, cover letters aren't fun, but they are necessary. If you feel like you don't really have the energy to do a cover letter, stop your application, stop trying to write a cover letter, give yourself a break, and come back to it when you are more energized. You don't have to necessarily apply for a position immediately after you find it. While it is a good idea to apply as quickly as you can, as quickly as you find it, it's better to take time, even waiting a whole day, to gather your thoughts and craft your cover letter when you're feeling the most energized and when you've had enough time to really digest and absorb the job posting and what you want to include in that cover letter. Think about it from a hiring manager's perspective. How would you decide between 2 or 3 or a handful of really similar candidates? Would you interview someone without knowing a little bit about them, their personality, or their writing style? If you're trying to decide between 2 candidates who bring similar qualifications and qualities to the table or to the role, The person who took the time to provide a cover letter is providing additional details about themselves that the other without a cover letter is not. So be the person that submits a cover letter because it can really help. All right, what else can cover letters do for you in regards to your job search? Let's talk about this. It can help you even if the hiring manager doesn't read it. It's possible that you've talked to people throughout the length of your job search or recently or before, and you might have even talked to a hiring manager who said, don't write a cover letter. They're not necessary. You might talk to another one that says you must write a cover letter. Our recommendation, of course, is to write one because when you apply to a job, you don't know if you are applying to an organization where the person is expecting a cover letter or doesn't really mind, okay? So keep that in mind. It's a tool to enhance. It's always better to send one. It really helps you focus on why you like the company and why you are a great fit for the company. So not just the job. So a cover letter and writing one, you are doing additional research on the company. You know, everybody does this, I would hope, before you apply to a job, even when you're updating your resume, but it's really going to help you sort of assimilate the information that you are gathering into one place, your cover letter, and it will help shed some light on if you really feel like you are a good fit and if the company is a good fit as well. When writing a cover letter, of course, we'll get to the more in-depth details in a few slides, but you always want to dive just a little bit deeper into the research and the company, explore things like their mission, values, and goals for the future, and any newsworthy events about the organization. Taking the time to focus on these things significantly helps you prepare for the job interview. It helps you write out answers for questions that you might face in that interview, like, why are you a great candidate for this position? Why did you apply here? What are your strengths? And so on. So going through the exercise of writing a cover letter really helps clarify to you why you're actually a great candidate. It provides a starting point for you to answer those interview questions in a way that highlights your fit for the position as well as the company and the company's culture. Think of writing this letter as a study session for interviews. You're going to gather your thoughts as to why this is a good fit. You're going to make a connection between you and the company's values, and you're going to determine your biggest strengths that align with the role. Once you write it out and see on quote unquote paper or on the computer that you are a great fit, it becomes easier to do cover letters like this. And then it will become easier to talk about those things in the interview process as well. So a cover letter essentially is pre-interview prep. All right, here are some formulas to follow for writing a cover letter. Once you found some companies and jobs of interest, you are going to position yourself in the best light for those applications. There's not a hard science to crafting a cover letter. So the formula is not going to be do this, it works every time. It's more of an art. But there are some things that you can follow that will help you craft a more engaging cover letter for your job applications. Okay, so first rule of thumb, write the letter like you already know who it is you are writing to. Pretend they already love you. And if you know them, right, that should be easy to do. Think about that they already know that you are great and they're already interested in hiring you. Think about it this way. They might be asking you, what inspired you to apply for this position? What are your big passions, dreams, and goals? Do you have any ideas on how we could do things even better around here? Those are some things that might help you start brainstorming what you're going to include in the first part of your cover letter for sure. I will use my example again of writing my letter, my cover letter for working at FlexJobs. In the first paragraph, of course, I said something like, I'm writing to apply to this role as a career coach. My skill set matches really well. But what I did is I connected another sentence that had something to do with the fact that I really wanted to work for an organization whose mission and values were closely aligned with my personal values. And I pointed out the most important ones to me in that first paragraph of my cover letter, okay? By getting in the mindset that the hiring manager already likes what they have seen on your resume and can already see how you would be a fit at the organization, it does help reduce the pressure you put on yourselves or that fear-based writing when you sit down to type and it's just a blank screen and you're like, I don't know what to say. This has us instead writing our cover letters with a much more positive mindset when we sit down to do it. All right, so we've got our mindset figured out, but what do we actually include in that cover letter? Just like with any other job search, your past experience is going to carry a lot of weight. So if you already have some remote work under your belt, make sure that you call attention to that in your cover letter, particularly if you're applying for a remote or hybrid job. By showing that you've already worked successfully in a remote environment in some way, you're going to be proving to the employer or whoever reads your cover letter that you've got suitable skills and can navigate the challenges involved with not working side by side or cubicle by cubicle with your team members or coworkers. Now, some of you might be thinking, what if you don't currently have any remote work experience? There's no need to panic. Let's move on to our next tip. You will include relevant skills for remote work. So even if you don't have remote work experience, it doesn't hurt to shine the spotlight on some of your most relevant skills. Think through some of the skills that are needed to work successfully as a remote employee. You're already probably thinking of things like communication, of course, I hope, time management, organization, self-motivation, etc., problem solving. Do you possess any or maybe even all of those skills? And if you do, you want to find ways you can work those into the cover letter for a remote job. You might get bonus points if you can include real examples of how you've used them to make a difference with past employers. You also want to think about emphasizing any times when you spearheaded projects or worked independently. This can help if you haven't worked remotely before. Have you ever taken work home in the evenings or weekends? Maybe you've done a volunteer or freelance project at home as well. Any of this counts as remote work experience, so you might be able to weave it into the content of your cover letter. An important thing to remember is, first and foremost, the employer cares that you can not only do the job, but that you can do it well, right? That's why they have a long job description with the skills that you need. So you want to spend most of your time focusing on the value you can provide for that company, as opposed to what they can do for you. You're going to resist that temptation to focus on what you will gain, more like an objective statement, like I am looking for. You're not going to do that. You want to turn your attention to what the employer will receive. The more you can use your cover letter to outline the undeniable value that this company will get from hiring you, the better off you'll be in securing an interview. You always have to submit a polished and professional cover letter, but it might be helpful to let a little of your personality shine through in this document, a little bit more than it would in, say, a resume. Employers want a solid understanding of who you are, and that is tough to ascertain from a generic cover letter and sometimes through a resume too, because those are pretty straightforward. Be sure that you answer any questions or required information listed on the job description, and if relevant, provide specific information concerning any employment gaps, or if you're relocating or willing to relocate if the job is in a different area than where you currently reside. Those are all details that you don't want to overlook either. All right. We've got some requirements for a job on the slide. And sometimes you might find extremely important information within the job description. I'm going to give you guys a moment to review this. Look for clues to help write a cover letter. Okay, so you've probably had time to at least skim many of these bullets, but if a candidate reads this listing too quickly, they may hit the high points, they'll likely hit the high points, right? But they might completely miss the last bullet that says, to apply, please include, I'm the best chief of staff in the first sentence of your cover letter, or your application will be disqualified. All right, so sometimes we learn lessons the hard way, but I don't want that to be the case for you when you are writing your cover letter. Be sure you take time reviewing the full job description, not only for key terms and phrases, but for any specific directions as well, like this. There are some things to consider when you are thinking about a salutation for your cover letter, and we on the career expert team here at FlexJobs get this question a lot. If you're not able to locate the specific person to address your cover letter to, that's okay. But if you are able to, that's great. And that's who you would address it to, the specific person. But if you don't have a name, you can think of other ways to open your cover letter. Do not address the letter to whom it may concern. You might notice or have already noticed that to whom it may concern is not included on the salutation slide for how you should start your cover letter. All right. Here are some great ways, alternative ways to address your cover letter if you don't have the name of the person that you are writing to. Dear hiring team at Acme Corp. Hello, Acme Corp marketing team. Dear finance hiring committee, dear hiring manager, or good afternoon, customer service, good afternoon, hiring team. Any of those are more current. They're not as dated or as generic as to whom it may concern. So let's just remove that from any possibility. Okay. Having a strong introductory paragraph that reflects warmth and enthusiasm, but also quickly gets to the point of why you're a great candidate. Here are some examples, and I am going to read through these because I think it's helpful to hear them out loud, but also remember you'll be sent the recording, so you will have this text on the recording. I am writing with enthusiasm to apply for the position of commercial loans operations senior manager at Citizens Bank. With a wealth of highly complex operational experiences within the banking industry, including risk mitigation, change programs, data stewardship, regulatory requirements, and a commitment to outstanding customer service for all stakeholders, I believe I can serve you well in this important role. It's likely in the job posting, there were phrases like data stewardship, banking industry, risk mitigation. These are already ways you could pepper in some keywords, even in your introductory paragraph. Second example, when I read your job posting for a director of remote operations, I was immediately struck by how much the position sounded like me, and I am thrilled to apply. I find myself becoming more energized the more I read about your company and this particular role, and I'd like to tell you more specifically why I feel we're a great fit for each other. All right, that's perfectly professional, right? It's perfectly appropriate, but it also lets the reader in a little bit on the person's personality. And finally, as a dedicated customer service leader, I am extremely excited to submit my application for the evening customer service supervisor position available with Spectrum Charter Communications. One of the most important factors in attracting and retaining customers is the development of high-performing customer service and call center teams. And that's exactly what I hope to develop and lead at Spectrum Charter. Okay, so those are some key examples that you can lean into for starting your cover letter. Now we have the body paragraph. So this would be paragraphs 2 to 3. A cover letter is not very long. So your body paragraph should be about 2 to 3 paragraphs, and they shouldn't be too long. They're not they're not like 5 sentences or anything like that. Reflect on what you bring. Number 1. Number 2, how you're going to fit into the company. And finally, include quantifiable information if possible. Here we go. Let's go through these. To be clear, I am not seeking another job. I am seeking an opportunity that will allow me to combine my passion for the rehabilitative space with my deep operations experience as a hands-on doer, as well as leading, growing, and mentoring high-performing operational teams. Number 2. From my experiences with household brands to the unfamiliar, a common thread throughout is knowing the overarching goals of the organization as well as its values and culture, and combining those aspects into sound operations practices. Most recently, my efforts at Gilson's Farm led directly to a 20% cost shipping reduction in a single year while driving 100% growth in revenues year over year. So there's some data there that the writer is letting the organization know about. And finally, here are 2 of the many areas where my experience aligns with your needs. Customer satisfaction. Improve customer satisfaction from a low of 35% to a high of 89% by creating an employee reward recognition program that promotes a customer-driven service culture. And the second bullet, employee retention and productivity. So I'm guessing on this application, customer satisfaction and employee retention and productivity were found in the job posting, and this writer is making sure to have a reader catch the eye of those key skills. Reduced absenteeism by 89% and improved productivity by 30% by holding weekly meetings to partner with my direct reports on managing stressful workloads, identifying pain points, and improving processes. This third example, as we just went over, is bulleted, which is another option, and it's a really good one to catch a reader's eye. Now let's talk about the conclusion. Here are a few examples of signing off and ending your cover letter. To thrive in the service of others, that is why I went to work specifically for this organization. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss the role and my qualifications with you further. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, and you can include your name. You might simply just say, I welcome the opportunity to discuss the role and my qualifications with you further. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, and your name. Another version, I would welcome a further conversation to discuss this opportunity. I look forward to hearing from you. Many thanks. My resume demonstrates the repeated and consistent business success, customer satisfaction, strategic thinking, and decision maker influence that Citizens Bank is seeking. Please let me know when we can meet to discuss this opportunity. Thank you very much for your time. Best wishes. Who was thinking when you were listening to me read that things like customer satisfaction, strategic thinking, and decision maker influence must have been keywords on the job posting? So there's another area you can pepper that in. And finally, my resume is attached, and I hope we're able to schedule an interview to discuss this position and my qualifications. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. Best wishes. All right. The main point here is that you are thanking them, right? You probably heard that in all of them, reiterating your interest, and mention next steps. This concluding paragraph should be tailored to the tone of the organization. All right. Before we dive into some things to avoid when it comes to writing your cover letter, here are some things if you want to think about a formula or a process when you actually want to sit down and tactically write your cover letter. Here are some strategies I have shared before. Number 1, you can sit down, and what you should do is set a timer. So maybe you're going to say, I'm going to work on my cover letter for this position I want to apply to for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes, whatever that is. I wouldn't go over 45 minutes for this if you're going to just lump some time together. Okay. The reason I think this is a good approach is because when you sit down to write a cover letter, it can be very easy to get into the research of the organization, which you have to do, but you can be very much stuck there and only do that for 45 minutes. And by the time you get out of that website and, if you go to then the LinkedIn page and Glassdoor reviews and then their social media profiles, 45 minutes have passed and you haven't started writing your cover letter. But you don't have much time left in your day because you have to get ready for the next day. You're still working, all these other life things come into play. So giving yourself a time boundary can help you be more efficient with your time when you are sitting down to write a cover letter. To take that one step further, I may do something like, I am going to write my first paragraph of this cover letter for this job I want to apply for, and I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to do it. After that 15 minutes, you're going to evaluate how you're feeling. If you feel like you have time to go on to the second paragraph or energy rather to go on to the next paragraph of your cover letter, then you're going to do it for another 15 minutes or whatever time frame works for you. Okay. But if you're not feeling it, and if that was too hard, that first 15 minutes, find another task on your job search list to do so that whenever you're trying to write your cover letter, you're feeling like you have the energy to do so. Okay. So those are some strategies that you can take in terms of the execution of actually typing or, typing your cover letter into a document. All right. So circling back to the slide, let's talk about what you want to avoid when you are writing your cover letter. A cookie cutter approach. We are not making gingerbread cookies. Okay. That all look the same. Some basic parts of your cover letter can be used for several jobs. The foundation might be the same or very similar, but don't send the exact same cover letter with each application. Take some time to address your interest in this specific company and this particular job. Don't be long-winded. Strong cover letters avoid regurgitating a resume. It's not the same thing, and they keep the language personal in a succinct way. I would not have a cover letter ever that is over a page. I guess if you wanted to do a word count, like 300 to 400 words is about where you might want to try to be as a really good starting point. While you want to have some personality, or it might be a little bit of a smoother tone than a more rigid tone, you don't want to be inappropriate. Exhibiting humor that's in poor taste is really bad. It's bad form in almost all situations, but it can be particularly harmful in a cover letter, which should not be a surprise. Don't use loaded words and phrases. Self-promotion can be tricky and it's easy to step over the line. Using certain words too many times or phrases can really be overkill, such as saying you're the perfect person for the job or coming off as too picky or demanding. Check, double check, triple check for spelling and grammatical errors. Unfortunately, though, our spell check systems don't always catch every spelling or grammar mistake. So be sure to reread your cover letter carefully before sending it off. What I suggest here, if you don't have a friend or family member that you could ask to maybe glance at your cover letter or read it to see if anything jumps off the page for them that you should adjust, take your cover letter, increase the size of the text or change the color of the text and read it again. Sometimes making that change will help you find something that you have otherwise missed because you have been the person reading and rereading and reviewing it over and over again. So sometimes our eyes read what we think we wrote. And so changing that can make a difference in terms of changing the text or the color. So we've seen people accidentally type manger instead of manager on applications because spell check won't catch something that's a word like manger and think it needs to be manager. And finally, wanted to add something about ChatGPT because most of us, I would assume, have been hearing about this. And there are questions about how and if you should use ChatGPT in your job search. ChatGPT can be extremely helpful when it comes to writing a resume or cover letter in a couple of ways. However, it can sometimes make mistakes or grammatical errors like we just talked about. it is critical that if you decide to use ChatGPT as a tool or a resource to help you, you review the information it gives you for accuracy before using any of that information in your professional documents. A few other things to keep in mind in regard to writing a cover letter with the help of ChatGPT. The text that is produced by ChatGPT lacks the style or tone of your typical writing. ChatGPT is never going to be able to capture your tone. So again, review and revise the information to make sure that it is you that is reflective more effectively, especially if you are using it to help you write a cover letter or an email, because these are more personalized documents. It's a more personalized style than what you would use for a resume, for example. And again, you really should only use ChatGPT as a guide or a resource for the type of information you want to include on your cover letter, rather than relying on it entirely to write it for you without proofreading the text it provides. Okay. Always, 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 I cannot stress this enough. If you want to use this as a tool, make sure you review and edit the responses to make sure that it is accurate, grammatically correct, and personalized. All right. But it can be a tool that can generate some ideas to help you get started. Most definitely. All right. All of that to say, let's recap the steps you should take when crafting your cover letter for your job applications. You're going to write one for every application. I hope you're taking that away from this webinar today. Include your relevant skills and experience, particularly for remote work, but also for the job, because you want to connect that experience and your skills to the most relevant requirements or the biggest requirements they're looking for in their new hire. Make sure you have a warm and friendly tone. Answer any questions, requests, or follow any directions from the job description. And finally, most importantly, proofread before you upload and apply, before sending that cover letter anywhere. All right. So before we get into our Q&A, please know we will be sending a recording in the next few days. If you do not see it, please check your spam folder just in case. Always look to the FlexJobs.com blog for any additional information you're looking for in your job search. All of the topics are covered in depth. But as we wrap up our content today, let's go ahead and look at the questions that are coming in on this topic. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see what the first question is.
Okay, folks, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Before we get rolling, could someone let me know in the chat section if you can hear me okay? Perfect. Thank you very much. So just as a quick reminder, if you have a question that you would like answered, please make sure that you are putting it in the Q&A section rather than the chat section. Helps me keep track of all questions in one place. And also, if you see a question that you want answered, you can click the thumbs up button so I know which questions are most popular. I forgot to mention that my name is Keith Spencer, and I am one of our career experts here at FlexJobs. So with that being said, we will go ahead and dive in. Our first question here is asking about the best way to format a cover letter to inform an employer that you are willing to take a job for which you are overqualified based on your work experience. That is a really good question. And it's actually, before I answer the question, I want to point out that it's highlighting that, the cover letter is a perfect place to address that. Obviously, you would talk about it a little bit more in the interview process. They might have some questions about that, but you definitely want to address something like that in your cover letter. So the thing to keep in mind is, everyone's preferences change, in terms of their professional preferences. So, if you have a pretty extensive career, maybe you've had some high level responsibilities or job titles, it's okay to then change your preferences to want something that, is a step or two down, not to make that sound demeaning or anything like that. The way that I would approach this in my cover letter, I don't think I would include that in my introductory paragraph, but I might start off my second paragraph with that information. And I may phrase it, something like, at this point, or, I might say, while I've had the opportunity to, manage and supervise teams throughout my career, at this point in my career, I want to move into something. And then I would sort of describe what sort of that, more hands-on type of thing is. Usually if you're at a managerial level, you're not necessarily doing the hands-on work, you're guiding and training others in doing that type of work. So then I would start to describe, my interest and preference now at this point in my career for that more kind of hands-on work. And then, as you go on in your cover letter, you want to give some specific examples of how you are, highly skilled with that hands-on work. You've not only done it yourself earlier in your career, but you've also taught, trained, and supervised people that were doing that type of work. So now talk about how, that sort of higher level experience can, allow you to be highly effective in that type of hands-on work. So that's sort of the approach that I would take. Mention that your preferences, your professional preferences have sort of changed at this point in your career, but then also, bring in the fact that that higher level experience has only made you better at doing that kind of hands-on work, quote unquote. And that's why you're, applying for this role and excited about this role. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay, our next question here says, do you have any suggestions for submitting a cover letter when the organization's portal or system does not provide an upload space for cover letters? That can definitely be tricky. Sometimes they will have a space where you can specifically upload a cover letter, or maybe there's a space where it says other documents. That's where I would maybe try to include my cover letter if there's not specifically a cover letter space. But sometimes there's only one place to upload just your resume, nothing else. You could see if there's maybe a comment or text box that you can fill in where it might say, do you have any other comments or things to add? You could paste your text in there. Another option, if you see perhaps that they list a specific contact or point of contact for that position, you could then reach out to that person and email them your cover letter. Those are all preferable to sort of this worst case scenario now that I'm going to describe. Your last option there, and I did see some other questions in the Q&A about this, so we're answering some other people's questions here. Your last case scenario is you could include your cover letter as the final page of your resume. So your resume, 1 to 2 pages max, but then on that, second or third page, you could then have your cover letter included there. So, that is something that you could use as a last resort, but I would try to exercise those other options first if possible. Okay. So let's go on here. Okay, so we have another person asking, if you are referred to a position, how do you add that information into your cover letter? Do you lead with that information? So I would not lead with that information necessarily. I would focus first on, what I've learned from my own research into that organization, talk about some things that excite me about working for this company or this organization. Maybe something in their mission really resonates with my work values, or maybe there's something particular about the role that gets me really excited. I would mention that first. And then still within sort of your introductory paragraph, I would then throw in, I had the chance to work with, person's name in the past, and we've stayed in touch since then. They've always spoken really highly of their organization. So when they, informed me that this role was open, I knew I had to apply, something like that. So, you don't necessarily want to lead with that, but you do want to mention that early on, especially if it's okay with the person who is referring you to include that. You would want to make sure that you're clearing that with them ahead of time. Just say like, hey, are you okay if I mention you in my cover letter, or maybe mention you in my interview, just so that you're not, not violating their privacy or anything like that, but just making sure that you're not putting them in any type of compromised situation. Make sure that you have their permission there. Okay, so we have another person here asking about how to address an employment gap. They were a stay-at-home parent. Are they supposed to not admit having children when childcare and their education was the main factor for working there? So, really good question. This impacts a lot of people, not just stay-at-home parents, but other people who, had to take some time away from the workforce for one reason or another. So, couple things here about an employment gap. I would make sure to first mention that on my resume. Some applicant tracking systems can, sort of flag if your dates are out of order, or, if they sense a gap there in your employment history. So I always recommend having a career break section on your resume when you do have an employment gap. If it were to, if it were a break, like you mentioned, to raise your children, I might be a little vague or a little tactful. I don't necessarily want to share a whole lot about my personal life with a potential employer. So I might just say something like an intentional pause in career to focus on full time caregiving, excited and energized to return to the workforce. So, you don't necessarily need to mention specifically, I took time off to raise my children. You could just say, focus on full time caregiving, leave it at that. It's specific but vague at the same time, kind of strikes that nice balance there. And then, they are not legally allowed to ask you any specific questions about, whether or not you have children or are planning to have children in the future, stuff like that. That's why I kind of recommend sort of that balance between specific and overly vague there. So hopefully that was helpful. Let's see here. Okay, so we have another person asking if dear sir or madam is an appropriate usage if you don't know the hiring person's name or the hiring manager's name, and could you call the company to find out who the hiring manager is for a remote position? So, as was mentioned in the webinar, to whom it may concern has become a bit outdated. Same thing kind of goes for dear sir or madam. So, I usually recommend and use myself. Dear hiring manager, or maybe dear search committee. Those are some good options there. You don't have to necessarily reach out to the organization to find out the hiring manager's name. In fact, I don't do that myself. If I want to follow up on the job, I might reach out to someone who is listed as a point of contact, or maybe if they're in LinkedIn as someone working in recruiting or talent acquisition, or even human resources. Then I might reach out and say, I'm really interested in this position, sort of re-emphasize that genuine interest and a little bit about my fit. Could you tell me the status of the hiring process? Like, I never really say like who's the hiring manager. I want to contact this person. If they are, willing, they might pass along your information to that hiring manager. But I'm getting off topic here. I would avoid dear sir, madam, and I would just use, dear hiring manager or dear search committee. Let's see. We have another question. Is ATS able to scan a cover letter as well as the resume? So very few applicant tracking systems scan cover letters. Typically, they only scan your resume. I don't want to speak in definitives here, because there are new ATS that are being put into use all the time. So there might be some that scan your cover letter rather than your resume, or in addition to your resume, I should say. Vast majority of them, though, are focusing on the resume. Now, that being said, doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't, try to incorporate some keywords, phrases, some specific things into your cover letter as well. As was mentioned in the webinar, you do want to tailor your cover letter just like your resume to that specific job. So, just by happenstance, you might include some keywords and phrases in your cover letter. But either way, make sure you're tailoring your cover letter for that specific job. Doesn't necessarily mean, though, that it's going to be scanned by the ATS.